Because in Zen, the practice of meditation, Zazen, the practice of meditation is considered to be the vehicle to having the experience of awakening, which is called Kensho or Satori, right? So if you're engaged in this process, if you're engaged in this work, if you understand the concepts, then you want to take advantage of everything that you can to start to come out of the conditioning experience that you're having, come out of the identification with the body, come out of the identification with the personality, and begin to move toward the freedom of being the awareness itself. And you know, part of that process that's important is to understand, while it may appear that you're moving from the conditioning to the unconditioned experience, or you're moving from the conceptual understandings to that which is non-conceptual, that while it may appear that that's the case, it's very important in order to succeed to understand that while that may appear to be the case, all the while you're always already there. All the while you're always already there. That has to connect with the idea that there's a process. And of course that's a paradox. You know, you're there but you're not there. Right? It's a paradox. But that paradox is powerful and important if you're going to have the awakening, if you're going to have Kensho, if you're going to have the realization. And then you want to also look at, what other things can I do? I can practice meditation. I can study the teachings, right? And if you make that a part of your everyday life, that will be very powerful in terms of moving toward this experience of awakening. But then there are other things you can do as well. I was listening to Richard Lang. He was in an interview, and he did the introduction to my first book, which was about Douglas Harding. And Richard Lang kind of took over the teaching of the headless way, Douglas Harding's teaching about headlessness, which to this day I really consider to be very powerful. It's another one of the things you can do to practice experiencing the truth, to practice experiencing who you are. Because the experience of who you are is happening right now. Right? This experience that we speak of, this awakening experience, this experience of your true nature is happening right now. That's very important. That's maybe one of the most important things you could refer to yourself in this practice. Because if it's happening right now, how hard can it be to recognize it, right? If it's happening right now and it's always been happening, it's never not happening, then it may be one of the things that has been occurring to me recently. Maybe the way to deal with this is to say, okay, I should assume that I am it rather than that I am not it. I should assume that I am it rather than I'm not it. I think that gives you a leg up because it's true. And then if you assume that you are it, it's also helpful because then you're on the right track. Because if you are it and you're not recognizing that you are it, right? Then the way you can look at this experience you're having is, what am I paying attention to that's keeping me from recognizing it, right? And the answer to that is thinking, right? Thinking, conceptualizing. This is a non-conceptual experience, right? So what that means is you've got to somehow get out of the conceptualization of everything, right? And this is what the koans are about, you know. In Zen, the koans are these riddles, right, that are used. And the one that was talked about in the 3 pillars of Zen was mu. You know, what is mu? It's supposed to be one of the first koans that teachers give to students. I don't particularly. I've always had a negative reaction to koans. I don't know, maybe because I'm too intellectual, because they're really anti-intellectual. You know, it's supposed to kill your intellect. To deal with contemplating a koan is supposed to drive your intellect crazy. So it can't deal with that and it gives up, right? And the reason that that's the case is because the experience of what you are is non-conceptual. So if by studying a koan and trying to answer it, you can get out of your conceptual mind, right? Then you're experiencing things the way they actually are, non-conceptually, right? And you are experiencing things as they are non-conceptually right now. But we are so trained to function as in a conceptual model, right? That doesn't even make sense to us. That's why the koans don't make sense to us. What is mu? Well, mu, you see, one of the reasons that mu is a powerful koan is because mu doesn't reference anything, does it? You don't know, you've never seen any mu anywhere, right? Right? So if you stay on that, if you stay focused on that, right, it really puts the intellect under pressure to surrender, right? And if you stay with that at some point, you can begin to see the non-conceptual reality. You can't speak about it, but you can begin to see the non-conceptual reality, and it can lead to the experience of kenso. Right? So, but whether or not you choose to do, to engage with koans is your business. I've always had difficulty with it, although I can understand how it works. It's probably the value of it can probably only really be had if you're using it in the relationship to a teacher. So the teacher's, interacting with you back and forth about it like that. But Richard Lang, one of the things that he spoke about in this interview that I saw recently was he was saying one of the ways that you can kind of deconstruct your conditioning, one of the ways you can kind of get out of your conditioning is to spend time with people who are like spirits, spend time with people who are also interested in this, right? Because the way you got to where you are, the way you got how you are is you spent time with crazy people. Starting with your family, right? And they spent time with crazy people, starting with their family, right? And so this craziness keeps getting passed along, right? And so one of the ways to get out of the craziness is to stop hanging out with crazy people and spend time hanging out with people who are at least interested in sanity, right? And talking about how to go sane, talking about how to be sane, talking about how to recognize the mistaken identity that human beings take on, right? And working your way out of that. So how much time, so if you're really committed to this and you're really interested in realizing this, one question that you should then deal with is, how much time do you spend with this? How much time do you spend contemplating it? How much time do you spend practicing? How much time do you spend learning? How much time do you spend in the company of other people who are in the same process as you are? Right? That's really no different than going to kindergarten when you were a kid, right? Because what did you do? You went to kindergarten and you spent time there every day. You went there every day, right? And you got into the group of children, right, who were also spending time there and learning the same thing you were learning, right? So it really helped to condition you that way, right? Because when you were a little kid, you didn't have any alternatives. There wasn't like you could go to this school and be conditioned this way or go to that school and be conditioned that way. No, there was only one conditioning, right? And not only is there only one conditioning, but it's part of the understanding that humanity has that there's only one reality. And since there's only one reality, there's only one conditioning. No matter where you're born in the world, no matter what language you speak, right? Your conditioning is the same in the sense you're conditioned to identify with being a physical body and being a person or a personality. That runs consistently through all people, all countries, all languages, all nationalities. That's the human conditioning, right? The specific social conditioning might be different from one place to another, depending upon where you live. And it could be different in very dramatic ways. But the conditioning of being a person in a physical body is exactly the same across the board. which also means that no matter where you're from, no matter what language you speak, no matter what color your skin is, no matter how old you are, no matter what your occupation is, no matter what your circumstances are, no matter what your experiences have been up until now, your ability to realize the truth, to recognize who you really are and experience the freedom that that provides is equally available to all of humanity. And this is becoming more of what the understanding it is as time passes, and the possibility that the internet presents us with can make it possible to communicate with millions of people about this. So who knows, you know, if the power of the internet is that we can communicate around the world with all people. I noticed in the last retreat that Angelo DeLullo did, there was 250-something people in that retreat, and they were from all over the world at the same time. There were people in Japan, there were people in India, New Zealand, Australia, all over the United States, right? All coming together at the same time in a meeting together about this business of waking up. So it's gaining popularity. There are a lot of people that say that this is a movement towards the shift of consciousness for humanity. I don't know. That's, you know, if there's 7 billion people, the number of people interested in this is still a very, very, very small number, right? So I wouldn't jump to that conclusion, but I would say that the idea of awakening and the process and the experiences and the practices are more available than they've ever been. And the teachings for that are more available than they've ever been. And the variety of teachers is more available and there's more variety than there's ever been. So in that regard, you're blessed. In that regard, we're blessed with the opportunity that's readily available to do this awakening. But you've got to be willing to give it the time and give it the attention that's required in order to undo this conditioning process that will continually come into play. And when you get to a place where you wake up and you experience your true nature and that becomes your orientation, right? Then the conditioning, your prior conditioning is not a problem anymore. See, because your conditioning is not a problem unless the way you relate to it is that, now watch, this is true. Your conditioning is not a problem unless the way you relate to it is that it's the truth. You get that? It's not a problem. It's not a problem that you think that you're your body. You know, it's like if you wake up and you come out of that, then you'll get freed up from relating to your body the way you were relating to it, because you realize you're not your body, but you better take care of it because it's the vehicle you're using, right, to be in the world, okay? And this is one of the things about this that's important to understand. This is not some theoretical, mystical stuff, right? If you don't get that you're not your body, right, find yourself in your body. Find who you are in your body. This is one of the inquiries that is done in Zen, right? If you consider yourself to be in your body, right? If you consider yourself to be the personality that resides in a physical body, right? Find it. Find that personality. Find that you in that physical body. And one of the things about these teachings and practices is that if you pursue self-inquiry, part of the pursuit of self-inquiry is to answer these questions like, if I am the personality, where am I as that personality? Where is that personality? If it's in the body, where is it in the body? Find it in the body. If you think it's in your brain, you know, I can tell you with certainty that if we were to crack your skull open and look in the brain, we would not find any you there. We'd just find gray stuff there. And the same thing would be true for the rest of the body. So what these teachings are telling us, and one of the reasons that Douglas Harding's work is so good, is because if you actually look at what the evidence says, what you believe to be true can only be a belief because there's no evidence for it. What you believe about yourself, what you believe to be true about you, can't be true because there's no evidence for it. So what can be more scientific than actually saying, okay, if you believe something, find the evidence for that. Find the evidence for what you believe. And in these practices, if you pursue these inquiries, you'll find that the evidence teaches you the truth. Same thing with the Douglas Harding experiments. If you do the Douglas Harding experiments are actually telling you to look at what's actually happening. You can't see your head. That's actually what's happening. You will never see your head. That's actually what's happening. And in place of where your head is, there is this awareness. And it's talked about in terms of having a third eye or a single eye. And what Douglas Harding did is he said, look, in one of his experiments, he said, you've got these two, he calls them, what's he call them? Two holes in a meatball. That's the way he talks about it, right? You got these two holes in a meatball that you're looking out of, right? But you're not seeing two things, you're seeing one thing, right? Your perception is one thing, not two things, right? And what Douglas Harding said is that may be what the spiritual teachers were talking about in the traditions as the third eye. The third eye, not the two eyes, but the one eye. The one perception that you see, right, is not two, it's one. Maybe that's the third eye. Yeah? And maybe if you look through the third eye and see what's actually happening, which is what all the experiments are about that Douglas Harding created, you can actually have a direct experience of the truth. It's happening all the time, but we're not paying attention to it. We learn, for example, that you're moving and the world is still, right? That's how you learned it. When you're driving your car, you're still and the world is moving, right? That's what's actually happening. But we learn, no, you're moving and the world is still. But when you're in your car, check it out. When you're in your car, if you look at the car and your body is not moving, it's still. You're here, it's still. And if you look out the windshield, the world is moving. That's actually what the perception is, right? But we learned it the other way, and so that's the way we see it. We see a perception that's a conditioned perception. And Douglas Harding's experiment said, okay, let's just look and see what's actually so about our perception, our experiences. So I highly recommend that you look into Harding's teachings and Harding's books and Harding's experiments. They can be a helpful addition to this process. So what is it? You can use that. You can use these direct experiments. You can study the teachings of the masters. You can listen to the current Advaita teachers, non-dual teachers that are available on YouTube. And then you can practice meditation. And then in addition to that, you can make it your business to pay attention during the day. In other words, make your whole life a practice. Pay attention during the day in such a way where you're practicing not being the thinker of your thoughts. You're practicing not being the source of your emotions. You're practicing seeing things in a different way, to come out of the conditioned way of seeing and experiencing things. And if you do that gradually, what starts to happen is you start to experience what's actually the case, which is non-dual. You start to experience not an interpretation of what you're seeing, but the actuality of what you're seeing, which is non-dual. Even when you focus on your breath, it's not something you're focusing on, it's something that's happening. You don't know that yet. Yeah? It's just happening. Everything is just happening. What you're saying right now, your question, is just happening just like your breath. There's nobody there. That's the point. There's nobody there. If you actually pay attention to the awareness, right, it's evident that the body is in awareness. The idea that awareness is in the body is something that you learned and you keep seeing the same way because you learned it that way. And if the truth is, now watch, if the truth is consciousness is everywhere, right, then it would be true that it resides there too.
Right, yeah, I see.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So you can put it wherever you want to put it, and you can experience it being there because it is everywhere, because it's all there is. Behind the mask, we're all the same, right? In front of the mask, we're all different. The appearance is different. The actuality of it is the same. See, if we weren't different, right, this would all disappear. So in order for this to be here, we got to be different. And that doesn't have to be a problem if we know that that's just an appearance. But if we consider the appearance to be reality, it's a problem.